An array in N8n is a list of items that you can reference all as one object. This is lesson 13 based on Nick Saraev's N8n mastery course. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to know when you're looking at an array versus a placeholder or an object versus a function argument versus a command to start JavaScript. And then we're going to look at the fact that arrays start with a 0 counter. So the position of the first element of the array is the 0th position, and the 1 element is the second item, and the 2 element is the third. So the syntax for an array is a square bracket and a bunch of comma-separated items. Those items can be numbers, they can be strings, which will have either single ticks or double quotes around them, or they can be objects, which will be surrounded in single curly braces. The entire JavaScript function is surrounded in double curly braces. So in the case of this array right here, it's the double curly braces say start JavaScript, the single square bracket says start an array, and the commas between the items delineate the individual array elements, and that gives you an array of 0. The 0th item is 1, the first item is 2, and the second item is 3, or those are the positions. So count from 0 instead of counting from 1. So we're going to look at the functions that you can manipulate arrays with in N8n JavaScript. The first thing we'll do is just look at an array, and that is that we're going to use this array of strings, and it is just John, Paul, George separated by commas. And if you are going to refer to those elements of the array, the 0 position is John, the 1 position is Paul, and the 2 position is George. If we want to know what the length of the array is, we can put at the end of the square bracket, you can put a dot, and if there are functions that you want to apply, they will pop up in the N8n editor. So length, last, includes, map, etc. So the first one is length, and the length of this array, as you can see over here, is 3. There are 3 elements in this array. So it's not the length of the string, it's the length of the array. What is the last member? So the last function returns the 1 element of the array that is in the last position. And in this case, John, Paul, George, the last position is George. The includes function tells us whether the data has an element that is of the string in the argument, in this case, George. And it returns a true, which is yes, it does. The map function goes over each item in the array and does the same thing to each item and returns an array with the results. So in this case, the map function is saying that the array item is called NUM, and we're transferring that to itself times 2. This is arbitrary. This NUM is arbitrary. You could say I equals I times 2, or transform it to I times 2. It's the same thing. Any value that you put in the first argument is your name for the elements of the array, and anytime you refer to that from that point on, like in the second here, it's the same element. So in this case, I is 12, and we're saying return 12 times 2, which is 24. The next element of the array is 32. We're assigning that to I, and then we're saying I times 2, or 33 times 2, is 66. And then we're saying 16 times 2, the third element of the array, is being operated on times 2, and that is 16 times 2 is 32. And so the array we get back is every item in the array times 2. The filter returns only those elements of the array that meet a certain criteria. In this case, we have one criterion, and it is that the length of the name is less than 5, and the filter returns both items that have a name that's length is less than 5. Okay. The next function is append. And in this case, we're adding the element Ringo to the 3 elements John, Paul, George, and now we have an array that has 4 elements, the last one being Ringo. At the time of this recording, the chunk function is not working. It should return a set of arrays that are the size in your argument. So I said, chunk this up into 2s, and it should give me John, Paul, then George, Ringo, then Mick, Roger, and then Joan in blank. But it's actually just returning the entire array as if no function were performed on it. So that is, in fact, a bug in N8n at the moment. I tried it on just integers, and I also got back an array of 6 items instead of chunks, three arrays of 2 each. Compact returns your array minus any empty fields. So John, Paul, George, blank, Yoko becomes John, Paul, George, Yoko, removing the blank element. Concatenates or adds 2 strings together, but in this case it adds 2 arrays together. And so we're going to create an array that has all 5 elements, John, Paul, George, Ringo, and Yoko. And there is our output, John, Paul, George, Ringo, and Yoko. Difference returns an array that shows where one set is different than the other set. So both have John, so we won't return a difference of John. Array 1 has Paul, array 2 does not, so we will return Paul. Array 1 has George, and array 2 does not. And array 2 has Yoko, which should be showing up over here. So if any of you guys are JavaScript experts, I'm pretty sure this should be Paul, George, and Yoko. Tell me in the comments if you think I'm wrong or I'm right, because I thought difference returned the differences from both arrays, but this is only returning what's in array 1 that's not in array 2. Maybe it's changed. Find will return the first element, so it won't return all of them, that meets the criteria that's in the find argument. And in this case, where name, and this is the same syntax we saw before, this could be any value, but once you name it, you're referring to your elements as that value. So name is what we're referring to our elements as, and we want to return the first one where the length is less than 5. That would be John, and that's what we have here. The first, it looks like I was pointing to the wrong one. Find the first element whose name length is less than 5, and then that's this one. Name is length is less than 5, and then first element of the array, just its position order, its 0th item is John, because that's the first item. And then index of is what position in the array is the argument that we handed the array, or the index of, and Paul is 0, 1, 2, so it is at the 1 position. 0 is John, 1 is Paul, and George is 2. Intersection shows where 2 arrays are the same. This array has John, Paul, George. This array has John, Yoko, George, and Mick. Where they're the same is John is here and here, and George is here and here, and we get John and George back. isEmpty, is it an empty array? John, Paul, George is in the array. Is it empty? Is false. Is array not empty? John, Paul, George is our array. Is not empty? Is true. It is not empty. Join, very powerful. Use it all the time. Join is going to take the elements of the array, and instead of being 3 separate items, it returns a string, and the difference, or the separator between the string, is what you put in the parentheses arguments to join. Putting a \n says separate each item in the array by a new line, and so we get John on a line, Paul on a line, and George on a line. Merge takes objects, arrays of objects, and it merges them together. So let's look at what we have. We start with JavaScript 2 braces, square brace for array, single brace for an object. The object is a key value pair, name Nathan. Then there's a comma after that object, and then we have another object, age, 42. So this is, and then we end the array with the square bracket. So this first array has two objects in it, and they have a name key and an age key. We're going to merge that with two more objects. This is a city object, and this is a country object. And the result of that is objects that we can't see in the debugger. So I'm going to append another couple of functions onto our merges to show us what we got. So these strings up till here are the same as this one above, where we got object, but I'm adding a .values function to the end, and it tells me that the values of this merged array are Nathan, Berlin, 42, and Germany. So the values are Nathan, 42, Berlin, and Germany. If I ask for the keys, what will I get? The key is name, age, city, and country, and that's what we get, name, city, age, and country. And we can also refer to the merged items by their key names. So what is the age value in this array? And it's 42. The city value is Berlin, and the country value is Germany. The pluck function grabs the value of the key that we request. So the function, there is an object in our array, two objects. One is name and one is age. We want to know what the name is, and the name is Nathan. If there are two objects and they each have a name, then we're going to get both names as a result. So here's an object that has a name, and then it has it has a name, and then it has an age. And here's another object in that array that has a name and a city. So we have two names, two objects with names. One of the objects has an age, and one of the objects has a city. If we pluck the name, we'll get both the names from the two objects in our array, Nathan and Jan. If we pluck the age from the two objects, we'll get the 42. And if we pluck the city from the two objects, we will get Berlin. RandomItem returns John, Paul, or George. In this case, it returned John. Reduce is crazy. I do not know anyone who has ever used it. I imagine that there are very special people who need to use it. If you want to learn more about it, here is a link. Rename keys is a way to change how we reference the keys in our array. Let's say I'm handing this off to my Canadian friends, and we want to change the key name to the key name nom. So I'm going to do rename keys, and unfortunately we get back objects, so we can't see it. So let's break that down with a pluck. So we've got a name object, another name object, and we're going to rename the keys name to nom, and then we're going to pluck nom, and we get Nathan and Jan. If I tried to get name out of this, it would disappear because there is no name anymore. We renamed the key to N8n and it returns, and we get Nathan and Jan. Reverses the sort of John, Paul, George to George, Paul, John. Slice returns the item position that we request in the parameter of the function slice. The 0, 1, 2 element is George, and that's what we get back. And smartJoin is another one like reduce that you have to have been doing this for a while for it to matter, and so I'm going to leave this one out, but I left you an example. Sort resorts by default, without any arguments, your elements into ascending order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. toJson string takes any quotes that you have in your elements, and it escapes them. When I say escape, it puts a backslash in front of them. And it does that so that the code interpreter doesn't interpret a quotation mark that you mean to be rendered as a quotation mark, and it doesn't misinterpret that as a quotation mark that's starting a string. Because if you start a string and then you have a quotation mark, the code interpreter will think that's the end of the string and skip everything else. So by escaping quotation mark ticks and single apostrophes or double quotes, you protect your elements from being misinterpreted and crashing. So in this example, we have a single tick, I am quoting, and then a double quick, hello, and then a single tick to end the string. The single tick is saying start string. The double quotation mark is saying start a quotation mark, not a string. Don't start a string, don't end a string. But the interpreter doesn't know that, so toJson string puts a backslash in front of that quotation mark so that it doesn't get interpreted as a start or end string. That's why you have backslash quote and then a quote at the end of hello. The backslash quote is the quotation mark, and the second quotation mark is the end of the string. Okay, toSpliced. I honestly don't know what the purpose of that is. Maybe somebody can tell me in the comments. Union gives you the result of meshing the first and second arrays. The first array has 1 and 2, the second array has 2 and 3, and the union of those two is 1, 2, and 3. So even though we have two 2s, we get one unique value for each item in both arrays. And unique gives us one item for each unique element, very similar to merging in a union, but in this case we have one array and it has a couple of non-unique duplicated values. We have two 2s, and it returns us the unique values from the array into a new array. So now we have an array of 1, 2, 3, 4. You are now an expert in N8n JavaScript arrays. Congratulations. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. That was lesson 13 based on Nick Saraev's N8n mastery class.